Gerald, and I'm a PhD in communications, and I teach students and corporate executives and individuals all over the country how to be more effective as a public speaker. Today we're going to be talking about teleprompters, notes, and also note cards. Now, we have used for many years various types of note cards and different ways to actually do the process of actually going through and having the different methods to present in our speeches. But let's talk first about teleprompters. Teleprompters are something that we typically as leaders and students don't use, but typically it's used by more of a politician. In this particular slide here, you see President Obama, and you see this glass shield in front of him. Now, for many years, many of us, including myself, had the idea that this was some form of a device as a bulletproof glass that's set up by the Secret Service. Well, it's all but that. This is not anything to do with protection, but this is a teleprompter. Matter of fact, if you look at this image right here, you'll see basically what the reporters are seeing when they look at President Obama speaking. These two pieces of glass shield there, that is his teleprompter. But the question is, what is he seeing? We're seeing a smoke glass that we can look through and see him, but what does he see? This is what he sees. He sees more of a blue image on the glass, and you can see that is a reflection of what's being ran below the very bottom. So his speech is being it's being transmitted from either a computer or maybe stored here, and it goes up onto the teleprompter so he can look at it and read. So when you see him looking through the glass, you may think he's actually looking at you, but in reality he is reading, or the person, the speaker, is reading the manuscript. Now you may say, why does he need this? And for common reason he does, because he does so many different speeches, like so many politicians, that they have to have a manuscript to read. There's no way that they can learn all their speeches. So this is a very effective form of giving a speech, and this is a teleprompter. Now this is what we call the good old days. Now look at this. This is like a suitcase that we set on somewhat of a table. And as it had a mirror there on the top, as you open it up, it was a reflection of a TV screen where actually the message was being typed. Now, if you're remember the movie Anchorman with Will Ferrell, remember in the end, I can't remember the lady's name who played his co-anchor, where she typed a thing like "You're stupid, San Diego," and he actually read it word by word. That's always been the problem with teleprompters, is that unless it's pre-programmed and put in there, and even if that's the case, if someone makes a goof when they're putting it in, the speaker is actually reading someone else's words, or they're reading what's been transcribed into it. So if you got a speaker who's reading word for word and something is messed up in this, then you've got a serious problem. Also, notice how you only have, in this case here, 6, maybe 7 lines going. It's going to be revolving. So depending upon how fast the speaker speaks, that line has got to revolve through. And if you've got a fast speaker, it's going to get them off pace. If you've got a slow speaker, it's going too fast. So the person who's controlling this has to be very aware of the characteristics of the speaker to know the pace to move the language, move the text for the speaker to take a look at. Now this is a great little piece here. This is what I like to call the covert teleprompter, because it looks like someone has a video camera. And think about this. If you're in the audience and someone has a camera and all you're seeing is the back of their head, you see the camera, you think that they're just like a typical reporter. They've got a video camera there and they're taking a picture. But actually what it is a teleprompter. Now, when did you use this? Think about a case where a politician or a speaker does not have the ability to take those big screens and set them up where they could actually read, but they still want to use a teleprompter. In this case, they may have one of their staff members standing close to the front. They have the camera, and it is going through, and that staff member is controlling how the message, the text is going through. So your speaker, again, can be sitting there looking at a teleprompter. Now let's talk now about speaking note cards, manuscripts, and different styles of having your notes. Because, like I said, very few of us will ever have a teleprompter. There are some people who are very fortunate to have one. I personally don't like teleprompters because I think that it takes away from your ability to have what we call an extemporaneous speaking style, which means that you're speaking through looking at key words and key phrases. So there's various different ways that you can actually create your different types of notes. The first one I like to refer to is called the outline form. And here is more of a speaking outline, and this is a little bit of a complicated outline. But when we teach people to construct their speech, we always tell them to put it into an outline form. Start with those three basic parts: your introduction, your body, your conclusion. And as you go in each one of those, let's say like your body, you break it down into 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, and then you page your subcategories. In this case here, they're doing 1, then 1.1, 1.2, very complicated, but still it's effective. And a speaking outline is a way to not only organize your speech, it's also a way to keep you on track with your speech, to know where you go to from each point to the next. Some people say they really like it to use it to speak by. Other people say it's a bit complicated because you got a lot of information here. This here, take a look at this. Think about if you're up there in front of a bunch of people speaking, you're having to read what you wrote here. So you're spending quite a bit of time looking down, trying to see what you wrote, and then trying to impart that knowledge back over to your audience. Outlines are fine, but for the most part, you have to be extremely familiar with your outline to use that as a speaking note on that. Now, this is probably the wrong way to do a speaking note, and that is writing on your hands. Now, I remember there's some people out there who they do this and they have no problems with it, but I think it's great unless you for some reason get sweaty palms because of nerves, or you wring your hands together. Then what have you done? You basically have smeared your entire notes. You won't be able to see this. I've seen politicians. Sarah Palin was one who was extremely good about the way she did her speeches, and a couple times they actually found that she wrote on her hand. I think this is actually a picture of that, where she actually wrote on her hand, so that when she was talking, that she was able to just kind of glance at her hand and had the notes of what she wanted to talk about. Sometimes you get stuck with what's called an impromptu speech. An impromptu means that you have no forewarning at all. You're told to maybe stand up and make an introduction about someone, or maybe speak about something. You have no forewarning, so therefore you've got to write down some very quick notes, and there's times where you may not have a sheet of paper, or you don't want to carry up there. Let's say, for example, and this is a hypothetical case where all you have is a paper napkin. You don't want to carry a napkin up there, so this is where maybe you would write something on your hand. I've had people who've written them on their arms. That does not really work. Then it's very apparent that you're reading your arm, but you can be fairly covert by reading your hand. But once again, like I always say, it's not the optimal way, because if for any reason you're sweating, or if you wring your hands together, or if you put your hands down on the podium, very likely you're going to smear your entire notes. Manuscripts. There is a place for manuscripts, and this is a very formal way to speak. And this is also your notes, but it's your notes word by word. It is a full sheet that has every word that you're going to say is your text. This is a complicated picture here. You can see there's a lot of little changes and notes all over the manuscript. Typically you wouldn't have that. You would just have your typed out manuscript. The problem with manuscripts is that you spend a lot of time reading it, looking down at your manuscript. You're not spending as much time looking at your audience, connecting with your audience. However, there is a place for manuscripts. You see quite often where there's a timed element involved. For example, maybe a minister has exactly 30 minutes before the television cameras cut off, so therefore they write it into a manuscript, they time themselves, and then they present it, and that way they stay within the exact number of minutes they can have. You find it also where you're trying to stay on task. You're trying to stay on script, as we say, where you've got maybe a defined topic that you're having to talk about, like maybe a press conference where you're reading a statement, or maybe you're the CEO of a company and you're going to come out there and you're going to talk about maybe something that's going on, that you are hiring 100 new people or whatever. You don't want to ramble on and on and on, so therefore you actually would write out a manuscript where you read it, and that way you don't go off topic and you don't start following these little rabbit trails everywhere else. So that is the purpose of a manuscript. And then, of course, note cards. Now, I start started by saying the title of this thing was Notes and Note Cards because I'm more of a believer in note cards. And the reason why is because in my case, now when I say note cards, I don't mean it has to be a note card, a 3x5 or 4x6 card. It could be a sheet of paper. I'm a believer in the best way to talk is to have your notes in either keywords or key phrases. That way it's no more than just a reminder of what you're trying to say to your audience. So when you look down, you see the phrase that may say, hired 100 people, or it may say, opening a plant in Shanghai. And then it reminds you what you're going to say, what you're going to talk about, and you can build off of that. So basically what it is just a reminder. Now, a lot of us learn to speak that way, where you actually just have a list of different keywords or key phrases, and we would put it on a note card. Now, I've seen this happen before, where people would put a whole manuscript on a note card, kind of like you see right here. That's not keywords or key phrases. That's a manuscript on a note card. Probably the worst thing you could ever do is to put your manuscript on the note card. Think how many note cards this girl has that she's going to be reading off of. She probably has got 20 note cards. She's going to be flipping those note cards, and the audience is going to be distracted with a constant flipping back and forth of note cards. So if you have a manuscript, by no means ever use a note card. Put it on a sheet of paper. Now let's get back to these note cards. So what does a note card actually look like? Well, here's a little better. This is a very formalized picture here. But basically what they're going to do is just give you enough of information that you can talk about it. And this is a picture of the word, an image, and maybe a key phrase underneath it. Typically, the way your note card is going to look is you will have maybe 9 or 10 key phrases or key words. You wouldn't really draw the picture, but this is just one. You can say it says this is a case where they have several different things, and this is just a reminder. I have found times where people will put 3 or 4 topics or 3 or 4 keywords or phrases on a card, and they're constantly flipping cards. You should really never have more than maybe one card for every 2 minutes of your talk. So therefore, if you're going to talk for 5 minutes, I would say you could probably get away with about 3 cards. If you're talking for 20 minutes, you're probably going to end up with maybe 10 to 12 to 15 cards. The more you flip your cards, then the more chance 1 or 2 things are going to happen. You're going to distract your audience, or if those cards get out of order, you're going to be confused where you're at. You've got too many cards every place. That leads me to say, always be sure you number your cards. I don't know how many times I've been in situations where I've walked up, put my cards on the podium, they've slid down, and they fell on the floor. And then I'm down there trying to pick them up, and I can't remember what the orders are of the card. So make sure you number your cards. And the next thing is, you should never write on the back of your cards, because it's bad enough to flip a card, but it's even worse if you're taking a card and turning it over and then flipping it, and take a card and then you turn it over and you flip it. How do you handle note cards if you have a podium? I encourage people to try to line them up just like you have a sheet of paper, because you have a podium, you don't need to be flipping your cards. You got a big panel there that you actually surface that you can lay your cards on. Sometimes it even comes to the point that you take a little piece of double stick tape and you stick those cards next to each other horizontally or vertically, whichever way works for you. And that way you're actually reading your cards, or you're looking at all the cards. You can step back and you're not really stuck there having to flip your cards. Now if you don't have a podium, then you want to have those note cards in front of you and you put them in your hand. I'm not a believer in holding the cards out if you can put them someplace like on a table in front of you or on a podium. But sometimes you have to hold those cards, and if you do, there's a couple tricks you can do here. First of all, get a colored card that matches something that you're wearing. For example, if you're wearing yellow or red, try to get those pink or yellow note cards. If you're wearing a black suit or navy blue suit, what are you going to do? Well, if you have white note cards, it's very apparent you've got that, unless you, for some reason, have a white blouse or white shirt, you can get away with that. I've actually told people before is that if you're wearing something that is a very dark color, take those note cards and get a black marks a lot and color the back of the note cards, or maybe get some black construction paper and put your note cards onto that black construction paper, so that what the audience sees matches what you're wearing. I've told people before too, is that sometimes if you have a sheet of paper, do the same thing. Go down to the office supply store, get yourself a red folder if you're wearing a red dress. If you're wearing a navy suit, maybe you need to go and try to find either a black folder to put your paper in, or to get some navy construction paper. The point is, you want the least distractions you can have, and to do that, the best way to accomplish that is to make sure that you don't have a clash between your note cards or your paper and yourself. And that's the end for today, and I hope you enjoyed this, learning more about teleprompters, notes, and note cards.